Hi, my name is Michael. I'm 44 years old, and until recently, I thought my life was more or less stable, maybe even comfortable. I'm not going to pretend it was perfect. Anyone my age knows that marriages rarely stay in the honeymoon phase forever, but I genuinely believed my wife and I had built something solid over 2 decades together. We met when we were both in our early 20s, back when I still thought love was about grand gestures and she thought stability was something you could just choose and never question again. Over the years, we learned to compromise, to raise 2 kids, to pay a mortgage, to do all the boring but necessary things that, at least in my mind, make up the skeleton of a long life together. I work in it, the kind of job that makes my kids roll their eyes when I try to explain what I actually do. The pay is decent, nothing extraordinary, but enough to keep a roof over our heads, pay for vacations every other year, and keep everyone fed. My wife, Anna, used to work in marketing, but she cut back to part-time after our first child was born. By the time our second arrived, she had essentially become a stay-at-home mom, though she dabbled in freelance projects whenever she wanted to feel like she hadn't abandoned her career entirely. I respected that choice. I thought it was a team effort, me keeping the paycheck steady, her handling the household chaos. I think it's important to paint the picture of who I am before diving into the mess, because otherwise people always jump to conclusions. Maybe he ignored her, maybe he was cold, maybe he drank too much or cheated first. I won't pretend I was the perfect husband, but I wasn't absent either. I was the guy who got home by 6 most nights, cooked dinner at least once or twice a week, and remembered anniversaries without needing Facebook reminders. Sex. Well, like most long-term marriages, it slowed down after the kids, but I never pressured her, and when we did connect, it was still good, still affectionate, still meaningful to me. So when I found out she was having an affair, it felt like someone had taken my entire life, flipped it upside down, and told me none of it had ever been real. And the way I found out God, I replay it in my head every day, like a movie I never wanted to watch but can't turn off. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I had just gotten back from a 3-day conference and was exhausted. It'd been living out of a suitcase, eating bad hotel food, and sitting through endless PowerPoint presentations. All I wanted was to hug my kids, take a shower, and collapse in bed. But when I got home, Anna was different. She looked nervous. She hugged me quickly, but her body felt tense, and she kept glancing at her phone while we ate dinner. I brushed it off as stress. She had been talking about feeling restless, wanting to pick up more freelance work, maybe even go back to an office job part-time. I figured she was preoccupied. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I noticed her phone buzzing repeatedly. She left it face down on the coffee table, which wasn't unusual, but something about the frequency of the messages caught my attention. I don't know what came over me. I'm not the jealous type. I've never been the kind of guy to snoop through my wife's phone, but something in my gut told me to pick it up. Maybe it was intuition, maybe just exhaustion making me paranoid, but I opened it, and just like that, 20 years of marriage unraveled in the palm of my hand. The first message I saw was from a guy named Chris. One didn't recognize the name. It wasn't her brother, her cousin, or anyone in our circle of friends. The text read, "I can still taste you from last night, counting the hours until I can have you again." My stomach dropped. I felt like the room was tilting, like he'd been punched in the chest. I scrolled up, reading weeks, months of messages. Photos, jokes, plans to meet up at hotels, confessions of love. Love. That word repeated again and again. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was building a parallel relationship, pouring her heart into another man while I sat at home thinking she was scrolling Instagram or working on a freelance project. I sat there with her phone in my hand, staring at the screen, my brain racing 1,000 miles a minute. I wanted to scream, to smash the phone, to wake her up and demand answers right then and there. But instead, I put it down. I didn't say anything that night. I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe as if nothing was wrong. That was the longest night of my life. The next morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. I confronted her in the kitchen while she was making coffee. I didn't yell. I didn't throw things. I just asked, "Who is Chris?" She froze. For a second, I saw pure panic in her eyes, the kind of look you can't fake. Then she tried to play dumb. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. I told her I'd seen the messages. That's when she broke down, crying, apologizing, confessing all at once. Yes, she had been seeing him. Yes, it had been going on for almost a year. Yes, she loved him. That last part hit harder than anything else. She said she loved him. Not just that it was a mistake, Not that it was meaningless. Not that it was a stupid fling. Love. I remember my hands shaking as she spoke. I wasn't even sure if it was rage or shock or something else I couldn't name. It was like my body couldn't process the reality of her words. For years I had believed we were a team, partners in life, raising kids, managing a home, facing the world together. And here she was admitting that for nearly 12 months, she had been splitting her soul between me and some stranger. I asked her who he was, how they met. She told me he was a guy she'd connected with through one of her freelance projects, a client who had become a friend and then more than a friend. She described it like it was inevitable, like she had no choice but to fall into his arms because he made her feel alive again. That phrase alive again burned into me like acid. What did that mean? Was I dead weight all this time? Was our life, our kids, our history not enough to keep her feeling alive? I tried to hold myself together in front of her, but I felt my chest tightening, my vision blurring. I asked her if she ever thought about me when she was with him. She said yes, that she felt guilty, but she also said she justified it to herself because you're such a good husband and father. I didn't think it would hurt you as much. That line nearly broke me. The twisted logic of it. Because I was good to her, she believed I could handle the betrayal better. I left the house that morning without saying much more. I drove aimlessly for hours, ending up in a parking lot at the edge of town. I sat in the car, staring at the dashboard, trying to make sense of everything. I thought about our wedding day, her smile as she walked down the aisle, the vows we exchanged. I thought about the nights we stayed up with sick kids, the little rituals we had, the inside jokes. I thought about how just last Christmas she'd written me a card saying I was her rock, her best friend. Were those lies too? Or had she been telling the truth in the moment and then conveniently rewriting her feelings whenever it suited her? For days, I went through cycles, confrontation, silence, more confrontation. Each time I asked her questions, I regretted it. The answers hurt more than ignorance. She told me about hotel rooms, about sneaking around when she said she was at the grocery store, about how he knew things about her I apparently didn't anymore. Every detail was a dagger. And yet, some sick part of me needed to know, needed to torture myself with the specifics because not knowing felt worse. I didn't tell the kids right away. They're teenagers, old enough to sense that something was wrong but not old enough to deserve the full weight of their mother's choices. I told them we were working through some issues and left it at that. Meanwhile, inside, I was collapsing. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I started dropping weight. My coworkers noticed, asked if I was okay. I made excuses, just stress, a lot going on at home. One night about 2 weeks after the discovery, I finally asked her the question I had been avoiding. Did she want to stay with me, or did she want to be with him? She didn't answer right away. She looked down at her hands, twisting her wedding ring, and said, I don't know. That nearly killed me. After 20 years, after everything we'd built, she didn't know. I kept hoping, stupidly, that she'd wake up one morning, look at me, and realize what she stood to lose. That she'd beg for forgiveness, cut him off completely, throw herself into repairing us. Instead, she seemed torn, hesitant, as if she were weighing two options like Job offers. I wasn't a husband anymore, I was a backup plan. That was the moment something in me shifted. I realized I couldn't fight for a marriage if I was the only one fighting. Love isn't supposed to be a negotiation, not when it comes to loyalty. I told her if she couldn't decide, then I would. I told her I wasn't going to live in limbo while she figured out whether another man made her feel more alive. She cried again, accused me of giving up too easily, said we owed it to the kids to try counseling. Maybe she was right, maybe counseling could have given us tools. But I couldn't shake the image of her in a hotel room with him, whispering the same words she used to whisper to me. Some things you can't erase with therapy. I started sleeping in the guest room. That first night away from her felt like freedom and agony at the same time. I stared at the ceiling, the silence of the room pressing down on me, and realized I didn't know who I was without her. It'd been Michael the husband for so long, I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be Michael. That was about 3 months ago. Since then, we've been in this strange limbo, still living in the same house for the kids, but barely speaking beyond logistics. She still sees him, I'm sure of it, though she swears it's over. I don't believe her. Trust doesn't regenerate overnight, and in my case, it might never regenerate at all. And here is the thing no one tells you about being cheated on at this age. It doesn't just break your heart, it breaks your identity. I keep asking myself if I missed the signs, if I failed her somehow. I replay every argument, every moment of distance, every night she turned away from me in bed. Was I not enough? Did I stop trying? Or was this entirely about her, her restlessness, her need to feel young and desired again? We'll probably never know. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking less about her and him, and more about me. At first, it felt selfish to shift the focus inward, but I realized I had spent so many years revolving around her needs, her moods, her expectations, that I had forgotten I existed outside of husband and dad. The betrayal forced me to face myself in a way I hadn't in decades. I started going to the gym again, not out of some quick revenge body motive, but because I needed a place to burn off the rage and grief that sat in my chest like concrete. I dusted off an old guitar I hadn't touched since my 20s and started teaching myself songs after work. The sound was clumsy, my fingers slow, but it gave me something that was mine. Even simple things, walking in the park, cooking a new recipe, journaling, started to feel like tiny rebellions against the version of myself that had been sleepwalking through marriage. Meanwhile, at home, the tension was unbearable. She kept insisting we could work through it, but her actions didn't match her words. There were still late nights she couldn't explain, still phone calls she took in hushed tones. Every time she swore it was innocent, I remembered the first time she swore she wasn't hiding anything. Once trust is gone, every promise feels like a performance. The kids started asking harder questions. My daughter, 17, cornered me one evening and asked flat out if mom had cheated. I didn't want to confirm it, didn't want to poison her image of her mother, but I also couldn't lie. So I told her, "Your mom and I have serious problems." She made choices that hurt me deeply. My daughter cried, and I held her, and I hated Anna all over again for dragging our children into the wreckage of her choices. Eventually, I reached the point where existing in limbo felt worse than ripping the bandage off. I told her I wanted a divorce. She begged me to reconsider, said it was a mistake, said she'd end things with him. But she'd had months to do that, months to prove I was her choice. And she didn't. I told her it was too late. Filing the papers was surreal. Walking into that office, citing my name, felt like putting a period at the end of a 20-year sentence. I sat in my car afterward, staring at the papers in the passenger seat, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something close to peace. It was grief mixed with relief, like I was finally stepping out of a burning building I'd been stubbornly trying to renovate. I won't pretend it's easy. Nights are still the hardest. The bed feels too big, the silence too loud. Sometimes I wake up reaching for her out of habit, only to remember she's not there and doesn't deserve to be. Holidays loom ahead like storm clouds. I don't know what they'll look like, how well split time with the kids, how it will feel to not have the traditions we built. But I also know we'll survive, and in some strange way, am grateful. Not to her, not to what she did, but to the brutal clarity it gave me. I spent years convincing myself that comfort was the same as happiness, that stability was the same as love. It took her betrayal to wake me up to the fact that I deserve more. Not more excitement, not more drama, but more honesty, more respect. I don't know if he'll ever remarry. Right now, the idea of trusting someone that deeply again feels impossible. But I do know that I'm rebuilding myself piece by piece, that the next chapter of my life won't be defined by her choices, but by mine. If there's anyone out there reading this who's in the same place, reeling from betrayal, wondering if you'll ever feel normal again, let me say this. You will. It won't be the same normal you had before. It'll be different. Lonelier at first, scarier. But eventually, it will also be freer, clearer, and maybe even stronger. Because as much as it hurts to say goodbye to the life you thought you had, it hurts even more to keep living in a lie.